Billionaire mocks black janitor's military stories. Discovers she's a decorated war hero with top-secret clearance. The sound of Marcus Steele's cruel laughter echoed through the pristine halls of Steele Industries like gunfire in an empty cathedral. The tech billionaire, worth $2.8 billion, had just delivered what he considered the perfect put-down to the woman who had been cleaning his corporate headquarters for 2 years. "Rebecca, please," Marcus scoffed, adjusting his Italian silk tie while his board members chuckled appreciatively. "We don't need to hear any more of your fantasy war stories. This is a serious business meeting, not story time." But what Marcus Steele didn't know, what his arrogance and prejudice had blinded him to for 24 months, was that Rebecca Washington wasn't just a janitor with delusions of military grandeur. Hidden beneath her humble custodial uniform was one of the most decorated combat veterans in modern American history, a woman who had carried top-secret clearance and led classified special operations missions that had prevented international catastrophes. Colonel Rebecca Washington had been invisible for 2 years, enduring daily humiliations while rebuilding her life after devastating personal losses. Tonight, that invisibility was about to end in the most spectacular and dangerous way imaginable. Because at that exact moment, 3 armed terrorists were breaching the building's security perimeter, and Rebecca's classified special forces training was about to save 200 lives, including the life of the man who had just mocked her service to her country. "Mr. Steele," Rebecca said quietly, her voice carrying an authority that made the entire boardroom pause, "I believe you're about to need those fantasy skills more than you realize." The Steele Industries tower pierced the Seattle skyline like a chrome and glass monument to technological dominance, its 47 floors housing one of America's most influential defense contracting corporations. For 2 years, Rebecca Washington had walked through its corridors carrying cleaning supplies, invisible to the executives whose multi-million-dollar government contracts depended on the very military expertise they dismissed in her. Marcus Steele, 51, had inherited his father's company and built it into a defense technology empire worth billions. He specialized in developing surveillance systems and communications equipment for the Pentagon, yet he had never served a day in uniform himself. His understanding of military operations came entirely from Hollywood movies and Pentagon briefings conducted in air-conditioned conference rooms. Tonight's emergency board meeting had been called to discuss a concerning intelligence briefing from the Department of Homeland Security. Reports indicated potential terrorist threats against major defense contractors, but Marcus treated the warnings like abstract business risks rather than real dangers requiring actual security expertise. The DHS briefing mentioned elevated threat levels and potential domestic terrorism, Marcus was explaining to his board while Rebecca quietly emptied wastebaskets around the conference table. "But our private security firm assures me that our building systems are impenetrable." Rebecca paused in her work, her trained eye automatically assessing the room's tactical vulnerabilities. 2 entrances, bulletproof windows on the exterior wall, no clear evacuation routes from this 42nd floor conference room. If she were planning an assault on this building, she could identify 17 different approach vectors that Marcus's expensive security firm had undoubtedly overlooked. "The important thing," continued Patricia Blackstone, the company's chief financial officer, "is that we don't let security paranoia interfere with our productivity. These threat assessments are usually government overreaction." Rebecca's grip tightened almost imperceptibly on her cleaning supplies. 20 years of military intelligence experience had taught her to recognize the difference between paranoia and preparation. The briefing Marcus had dismissed so casually contained tactical indicators that she recognized from classified threat assessments she had written during her time at U.S. Special Operations Command. "Rebecca," Marcus called out with his typical condescension, "since you're here, maybe you can share some of your military wisdom with us. You're always going on about your supposed Army experience." The board members chuckled at what they clearly considered good-natured ribbing of the help. For 2 years, they had treated Rebecca's occasional references to military service as the harmless fantasies of someone seeking to inflate her importance. "I served in the Marine Corps, sir," Rebecca replied quietly, continuing her work. "Not the Army." "Oh, excuse me," Marcus said with exaggerated deference. "The Marines. Let me guess. You were a cook? Maybe drove a supply truck?" More laughter from the board. Rebecca had heard variations of this conversation dozens of times over the past 2 years. To these civilian executives, military service was either heroic fantasy or menial support work, with no understanding of the specialized roles that actually kept America safe. What they didn't know was that Colonel Rebecca Washington had commanded Alpha Company, 3rd Battalion, Marine Special Operations Regiment. She had led classified direct action missions in 7 different countries, held top-secret, sensitive, compartmented information clearance, and had been personally decorated by 3 different Secretaries of Defense for operations that would never appear in public records. "Actually," Rebecca said, straightening up from the wastebasket she was emptying, "I was in special operations, force reconnaissance and counter-terrorism." Marcus's eyebrows shot up in theatrical surprise. "Special operations? Of course you were. And I suppose you single-handedly won the war on terror, too?" The room erupted in laughter. Patricia Blackstone wiped tears from her eyes. "Rebecca, you have such an imagination. Next, you'll be telling us you worked with Navy SEALs." "Joint operations with SEAL Team 6, actually," Rebecca replied matter-of-factly. "Along with Delta Force, CIA Special Activities Division, and British SAS. Operation Neptune's Shield, Operation Desert Falcon, Operation Silent Thunder." "Enough!" Marcus interrupted, his laughter turning sharp with irritation. "Rebecca, this is exactly what I'm talking about. We're trying to conduct serious business here, and you're spinning some fantasy about being a Special Forces superhero." Rebecca stopped her work entirely and looked directly at Marcus Steele. For the first time in 2 years, her posture shifted subtly from the deferential stance of a custodial worker to the bearing of someone accustomed to command authority under fire. "Mr. Steele, those operations are classified at levels above your security clearance, even with your defense contracts. I shouldn't have mentioned them." The honesty in her voice was unsettling. There was no boastfulness, no dramatic flourish, just the matter-of-fact tone of someone stating operational details. Marcus felt a flicker of uncertainty. "Rebecca, if you really had this background, why would you be working as a janitor?" For the first time, pain flashed across Rebecca's composed features. "Because 2 years ago, I lost my husband and daughter in a car accident while I was deployed overseas. When I came home for their funeral, I had what the military calls acute stress reaction. The Corps gave me an honorable medical discharge with full benefits, but I needed time to process." The room fell quiet. Even Marcus seemed taken aback by the raw honesty of her admission. "I took this job because I needed something simple, routine, predictable. Something that wouldn't require life or death decisions or split-second tactical assessments. I just wanted to clean floors and go home to an empty apartment." Rebecca resumed her work, but the atmosphere in the room had shifted. Her vulnerability had been so genuine that even Marcus's cynicism was momentarily disarmed. "Look, Rebecca," Marcus said, his tone softer but still patronizing, "I'm sure you served our country with honor. But let's be realistic about—" The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, bathing the conference room in an eerie red glow. Then came the sound that would haunt Marcus Steele for the rest of his life, automatic gunfire from somewhere in the building below them. "What the hell?" Patricia began. "Everyone on the floor, now!" Rebecca's voice had transformed completely. Gone was the quiet custodial worker. In her place stood someone whose every word carried the authority of life and death command decisions. The executives looked around in confusion. "Rebecca, what?" Marcus started. "Get down!" Rebecca roared with such commanding force that every person in the room dropped to the floor without question. "Patricia, crawl to that corner and call 911. Tell them we have an active shooter situation, 42nd floor, Steele Industries Tower. Marcus, how many people are in the building?" I don't know. Maybe 200? Security systems? Electronic locks? Cameras? But the power? "The attackers cut the main power to disable your electronic security," Rebecca said, her voice calm and analytical even as gunfire echoed from the floors below. "They'll have backup generators for essential systems, but your electronic locks just failed. Every secured door in this building is now unlocked." Marcus stared at her in amazement. This was not the rambling janitor who told military stories. This was someone who understood tactical operations with terrifying precision. "How do you know all this?" he whispered. Rebecca was already moving, her cleaning cart forgotten as she assessed the room's defensive positions. "Because if I were attacking this building, that's exactly how I'd do it." If this story of hidden heroism and the prejudices that blind us to real warriors is already gripping you, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Because what Rebecca is about to do will prove that real heroes don't always look like what we expect. The sound of automatic weapons fire was getting closer, climbing the building floor by floor like a deadly tide. Rebecca Washington moved through the darkened conference room with the fluid precision of someone whose muscle memory had been forged in the crucible of actual combat. "Rebecca, what are you doing?" Marcus whispered, watching in amazement as she systematically barricaded the room's entrances using furniture with tactical efficiency. "Establishing a defensive perimeter," Rebecca replied, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had done this before under far worse conditions. "These windows are bulletproof, which means we can't escape, but they can't shoot in. The elevators are down with the power, so they'll have to use the stairwells." She pulled out her cell phone and dialed a number from memory. "This is Colonel Rebecca Washington, service number 2847395. I need to report a code red domestic terrorism event at Steele Industries Tower, Seattle. Building is under assault by at least 3 hostiles with automatic weapons." Marcus's mouth fell open. That wasn't the voice of someone playing pretend. That was the voice of someone with genuine military protocol knowledge. "Patch me through to Colonel Martinez at JSOC," Rebecca continued into the phone. "Tell him Reaper 6 is requesting immediate tactical support for civilian protection." "Reaper 6? Patricia whispered. "My call sign," Rebecca replied without looking away from her phone. "Colonel Martinez? It's Rebecca. I need a tactical assessment team and hostage rescue on my location." "Yes, sir. I'm currently protecting civilian executives." "Understood." She hung up and turned back to the group. "Military response is en route, but it'll be 20 minutes minimum. We need to survive until then." The gunfire was getting closer. Rebecca moved to the conference room's main screen and began accessing building schematics from memory. "How do you know our building layout?" Marcus asked. "I've been cleaning this building for 2 years," Rebecca replied, pulling up floor plans. "Do you think I just pushed a mop around randomly? I know every entrance, every exit, every security vulnerability, and every tactical advantage." She pointed to the screen. They entered through the parking garage. Classic approach for urban assault. Cut power to disable electronic security, then advance floor by floor to control the building systematically. "How many do you think there are?" Patricia asked, her voice shaking. Rebecca listened carefully to the pattern of gunfire. 3, maybe 4 shooters. Professional spacing, coordinated advance. This isn't random violence. This is a planned, military-style operation. Marcus felt his understanding of reality shifting beneath him. "You can tell all that from listening?" "I spent 15 years analyzing enemy tactics in real time," Rebecca replied. "You learn to read the signs when your life depends on it." The gunfire stopped suddenly. In the silence that followed, Rebecca's expression grew more serious. "They've reached our floor," she said quietly. "Everyone stay down and stay quiet." Heavy footsteps could be heard in the hallway outside. Rebecca moved to the conference room door and placed her ear against it, listening with the focused intensity of a predator. "3 hostiles," she whispered. "Military gear, coordinated movement. They're checking offices systematically." A voice echoed through the hallway, accented English with tactical commands. "Building secured to level 42. Civilian count approximately 200. Begin collection protocol." Rebecca's face went pale. "Collection protocol means they're taking hostages. This isn't just an attack, it's a kidnapping operation." Marcus crawled closer to her. "What do we do?" "We have 2 choices," Rebecca replied. "Hide here and hope they don't find us, or I take them out before they can harm anyone else." "Take them out?" Patricia's eyes widened. "You're talking about 3 armed terrorists." "I'm talking about 3 hostile combatants who are threatening American civilians," Rebecca corrected. "And yes, I can neutralize them." Marcus stared at her. "You're serious? You really think you can fight 3 armed men?" Rebecca's expression was deadly serious. "Mr. Steele, in Afghanistan I eliminated a 6-man Taliban cell that had taken a village hostage. In Iraq, I led a rescue operation that freed 18 captured contractors from a heavily fortified compound. In Syria, those are classified operations," Marcus interrupted. "Yes, they are," Rebecca confirmed, "which is why you've never heard about them and why you didn't believe me when I mentioned them." The sound of doors being kicked in was getting closer. Rebecca made a decision that would either save everyone in the building or get them all killed. "I'm going out there," she announced. "What? No!" Marcus grabbed her arm. "You can't." Rebecca looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. "Mr. Steele, for 2 years you've treated me like I was invisible. You've mocked my service, dismissed my experience, and assumed I was lying about my military background. Now I'm going to use that same background to save your life." She gently removed his hand from her arm. "And when this is over, you're going to understand why someone with my qualifications was willing to clean toilets for minimum wage." Rebecca moved to her cleaning cart and opened a concealed compartment Marcus had never noticed. Inside was a military combat knife, a tactical flashlight, and what appeared to be a military radio. "You've been carrying weapons this whole time?" Patricia gasped. "Old habits," Rebecca replied, checking the knife's edge. "Plus, security guards never searched the cleaning lady's cart thoroughly." She moved back to the door and listened again. The hostiles were 3 rooms away and closing in. "If I don't come back," Rebecca said quietly, "tell the military response team that the hostiles have automatic weapons, but they're not wearing body armor. Tell them the attack pattern suggests foreign military training, probably Eastern European or Middle Eastern special forces." "How can you possibly know that?" Marcus asked. "Because I've fought against both," Rebecca replied, "and because staying alive was my job for 20 years. She opened the door silently and disappeared into the darkened hallway, leaving behind 3 executives who were finally beginning to understand that the woman they had dismissed as a fantasizing janitor was about to engage in real combat to save their lives. In the silence that followed, Marcus Steele had the most humbling realization of his privileged life. He had spent 2 years employing one of America's most elite warriors, and he had been too arrogant to recognize her value. The sounds that echoed through the building over the next 10 minutes would haunt him forever. Not gunfire, that would have been expected, but the brief professional sounds of hand-to-hand combat, quick, efficient, deadly. When Rebecca Washington returned to the conference room 20 minutes later, she was covered in blood that wasn't her own, carrying weapons that hadn't been hers, and wearing the calm expression of someone who had just completed another successful mission. "Building secured," she announced. 3 hostiles neutralized. No civilian casualties. Marcus looked at her with a mixture of awe and terror. You killed 3 armed terrorists with a knife. Actually, only 2 with the knife, Rebecca corrected matter-of-factly. The third one I took down with hand-to-hand combat techniques I learned from Israeli Krav Maga instructors during joint operations. The sound of helicopters approaching filled the air. Military vehicles were surrounding the building. "That'll be the cavalry," Rebecca said, finally allowing herself to show signs of exhaustion. "Right on time. Can you believe what just happened? Rebecca just saved 200 lives using skills everyone thought were fantasies. If this incredible display of hidden heroism is making you think differently about the people around you, smash that like button and share this with someone who needs to see what real courage looks like." The steel industries tower was surrounded by a small army of emergency responders, military vehicles, and media crews by the time Rebecca Washington finally sat down in the conference room she had defended with her life. Her custodial uniform was torn and blood-stained, but her bearing remained that of a professional soldier who had completed her mission successfully. Colonel Martinez from Joint Special Operations Command entered the conference room flanked by 2 other officers, their faces showing the mixture of relief and professional respect reserved for successful counterterrorism operations. "Colonel Washington," Martinez said, his voice carrying the weight of military protocol and personal admiration. "Outstanding work tonight. 3 hostiles neutralized, 0 civilian casualties, building secured, textbook execution." Rebecca stood and saluted with precise military bearing. "Thank you, sir. The hostiles were professional grade, Eastern European training, possibly Spetsnaz background. They were executing a coordinated hostage extraction, likely targeting defense industry executives." Marcus Steele watched this exchange with growing amazement. This wasn't role-playing or fantasy. This was real military debrief between actual officers discussing an actual combat operation. "Colonel, we've reviewed the building's security footage," Colonel Martinez continued. "Your tactical assessment was perfect. You identified their entry point, predicted their advance pattern, and neutralized them using minimal force and maximum efficiency. The Pentagon wants a full after-action report." "Of course, sir," Rebecca replied. "I'll have it on your desk by 0800. Colonel Martinez turned to Marcus and the other executives. "Gentlemen, I need you to understand something. What happened here tonight was prevented from becoming a national security incident by one of the most decorated special operations officers in Marine Corps history." He gestured toward Rebecca. "Colonel Washington holds the Navy Cross, 2 Silver Stars, and 3 Bronze Stars with V for Valor. She's led more classified counterterrorism operations than most people have read about in newspapers. Tonight, she probably saved not just your lives, but a major international incident." Patricia Blackstone looked like she was going to faint. "All this time, we thought she was just the janitor," Rebecca finished quietly. "I know what you thought." Marcus stepped forward, his face showing a mixture of shame and awe. "Colonel Washington, I don't even know where to begin apologizing." "You don't need to apologize for not knowing my background, Mr. Steele," Rebecca replied. "But you do need to apologize for assuming that my background didn't matter." Colonel Martinez pulled out a folder. "Colonel Washington, I have orders from the Secretary of Defense. You're being recalled to active duty with immediate promotion to full colonel and assignment to the Pentagon's Domestic Counterterrorism Task Force." Rebecca's composed expression cracked for the first time. "Sir, I'm not sure I'm ready." "Colonel, tonight proved you're more than ready," Martinez interrupted. "The Secretary specifically requested you after reviewing your performance. Full honors, full back pay for the time you've been out, and a personal commendation from the President." Marcus watched as Rebecca wrestled with emotions he couldn't begin to understand. "Colonel, what does this mean for your position here?" Rebecca looked around the conference room she had cleaned hundreds of times, then back at Marcus. "It means, Mr. Steele, that I'll be returning to the job I was trained for. Protecting America from people who want to harm civilians like you." "But why?" Marcus asked desperately. "Why did you stay invisible for 2 years? Why didn't you tell us who you really were?" Rebecca's expression softened with a mixture of sadness and hard-earned wisdom. "Because I needed to heal, Mr. Steele. After losing my family, I needed time to remember that there were still things worth protecting. Watching all of you live your lives, build your businesses, raise your families, it reminded me why the work I did mattered." She paused, looking out the bulletproof windows at the city lights below. "And because I learned something important about assumptions. You assumed I was nobody important because I cleaned floors. I assumed you were arrogant and heartless because you had money. We were both partly right and completely wrong." Patricia wiped tears from her eyes. "How can we ever thank you?" "You can remember this feeling," Rebecca replied. "The next time you encounter someone whose current job doesn't match their background, remember that everyone has a story. Some are exactly what they appear to be, and they deserve respect for that. Others, like me, are temporarily invisible while life takes them through unexpected chapters." Colonel Martinez cleared his throat. "Colonel Washington, we need to debrief and process the scene. Your transportation to the Pentagon is waiting." Rebecca nodded, then turned back to Marcus one final time. "Mr. Steele, I have one last thing to say to you." "What's that?" "Your defense contracts with the Pentagon? They're about to get a lot more scrutinized. The people evaluating your security protocols will include officers who actually understand military operations. I suggest you upgrade your consulting team to include people with real combat experience." Marcus nodded slowly. "Colonel, would you consider consulting for us when your Pentagon assignment allows?" Rebecca smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from her in 2 years. "Mr. Steele, my consulting rate as a Pentagon colonel is considerably higher than what you were paying for janitorial services." The room erupted in surprised laughter, breaking the tension that had gripped them all night. "I imagine it is," Marcus replied, "and I imagine it's worth every penny." As Rebecca gathered her personal items and prepared to leave with the military escort, she paused at the conference room door. "Ladies and gentlemen, it has been educational working with you, but Colonel Rebecca Washington has national security to handle." She started to leave, then turned back one final time. "Oh, and Mr. Steele, those weren't fantasy war stories. They were classified operational histories. The difference matters." With that final military bearing, Colonel Rebecca Washington walked out of Steele Industries and back into the career that had been waiting 2 years for her return. 6 months later, Rebecca was featured on the cover of Military Times as the Invisible Warrior, how one colonel's journey from combat to custodial work redefined heroism. Her story sparked a national conversation about veteran employment and the danger of assuming someone's worth based on their current circumstances. Marcus Steele used his defense industry influence to establish the Washington Foundation, which provided transitional employment and support services for veterans dealing with PTSD and career transitions. His first hire was a former Navy SEAL working as a security guard while struggling with civilian employment. And Rebecca's tactical recommendations transformed Steele Industries into one of the most security-conscious defense contractors in America, with veteran consultants at every level of operations planning. The cleaning supplies Rebecca had left behind in Steele Industries were replaced by new workers whom Marcus now treated with dignity, whose backgrounds he learned, and whose service he honored. Because once you've been saved by someone society taught you to overlook, you never quite see the world the same way again. The medal ceremonies, the Pentagon assignment, and the presidential commendation were all meaningful honors. But the real victory was simpler. Rebecca Washington was no longer invisible, and the people around her had learned to see beyond their assumptions, to recognize the heroes who might be hiding in plain sight. If Colonel Rebecca's incredible story has inspired you to look at veterans and service workers with new respect, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with everyone who needs to hear this message. Because the next hidden hero might be closer than you think, and they deserve our recognition.